Anna, welcome to the Calm Mom podcast. So grateful to have you with us today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. It's a pleasure. I'm excited to speak with you.
Yes, you guys, we just got off an interview for her podcast, so we'll link that below so you guys can go check it out. Obviously, you listen to podcasts, you listen to parenting podcasts, and we just have so much, I think, overlap in our philosophy and the things that we teach and value. So, if you're listening here, go check out her show too. But I'm excited because we're going to be talking about parenting, and I want it to be very practical today. And I think it's so important to zoom out and see some of the bigger picture in what's driving what we're experiencing. And so I'm excited to pick your brain on that. But before we begin, would you just tell everyone a little bit about kind of your background? You're also a mom, carrying so much training and so much personal wisdom. Just let the people know.
Well, I was born and raised in Armenia. I came to the United States when I was 27. I went to graduate school here. Then I met my husband here. He's an American. And, I stayed. Before that, I was, all my life, I was an educator and a psychologist. I work with children. And my daughter was born 17 years ago. And it was the first time that I was faced with my own traumas and,
Mhm.
ungrieved losses for the first time in a really major way. And I recognized that, wow, parenting is not as easy or glorified and romantic as we see it in
Yeah.
newspapers, magazines, and on TV.
Yeah.
You'd have to do some work, on yourself, or inner work rather. You have to figure this out, otherwise you're going to repeat the same patterns unconsciously. So there were a couple of things, stories like that raised my awareness to that understanding. And I shifted my focus into working with parents instead of children. And so
Mhm.
I've been working with parents for the past 17 years. I have my private practice here in New Jersey. I specialize in parenting and co-parenting. I'm a divorce mediator. So that's how I started my practice and my background. When I was 13, in Armenia, a severe earthquake happened. That's the biggest part of my story. I lost everything, including my mom. She was 35. I was 13. I lost everything: my teachers, my friends, my classmates, my home. I was dislocated to Russia, then to the Republic of Georgia. So that experience obviously, impacted me and informed who I am and how I am. That's part of my story as well.
Mhm. Thanks for sharing all of that. And I think even just the realness with which you started, like we can think we have things together or figured out, and then we have children, and it's just so immensely humbling. And I can relate in a lot of ways to that. And then thanks for sharing, other parts of your story. But I wonder if you'd be willing to share how that first started to manifest in early motherhood, because I think for a lot of us there's not enough talk about how hard it is. And then, like I'm like, man, I'm equipped to like do so many things. Like professionally, my marriage I thought was really solid, and then we brought home this tiny baby, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, what is going on? Like I am I just not cut out for this? And I wonder if I know there are women listening who can relate to our story in different ways, but can you share a little bit about what kind of came up for you that you're like, whoa, I need to take a look at this?
Several things came up, but I can share maybe one or two. The first time it showed up for me was when I was pregnant, and you have to go get the testing done, the screening for the gender, right? I think it's at 5 or 6 months. You go and they look at you and they ask you, do you want to find out the gender? And of course I said yes, I wanted to find out. And all along, when I was pregnant, I had a really happy pregnancy. I wanted to have a child. I was in a mature place, I have to say. But obviously, having grown up without the mother, having been parentified, and
Mhm.
having all that baggage, it was a lot. And um, knew somehow in my mind, I had this saying that I cannot be a mom to a girl because I grew up motherless. How can I be a mom to a girl? So I wanted to have a boy. In my mind, that was like, that makes more sense. I can be a mom to a boy.
Wow.
And then when the technician asked me, do you want to find out the gender? I'm like, yes, of course. And she said, you're having a girl, congratulations. And in that moment, I just burst into tears, and I just having this abnormal reaction, right? This
Mm.
oversized reaction to this news. And my husband said, what's going on? Like, we should be happy. We're having a healthy child.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the first time that it hit me in that moment, that I have a lot of work to do around this. My identity as a woman, as a mother, and raising a daughter. And then later in parenthood, I was lonely, isolated the first months, and the first year was really hard with the breastfeeding and everything. I was in a foreign country.
Yeah.
Being a mom, that was really, it just triggered a lot of stuff. And I even did a podcast episode. I call it the dark side of motherhood. So I talked about on my podcast, but that's how it started.
Yeah. Wow. Um, so much of your teaching is informed by having an understanding of how trauma can impact our parenting. And I'm so grateful that you're filling this space because there's such a need. And I think for us as parents, and maybe this is not true and it feels like a generalization, but I think overall we can be kind of quick to minimize our own experience or be, like if we don't have a story that sounds like yours, right? We can think that we had a very normal, quote unquote, childhood and that
Hmm.
we haven't experienced any trauma. And yet patterns that we're seeing that pop up in parenthood are
Yeah.
tied, right, to things that have happened or not
Yeah.
happened as we were growing up and with our caregivers. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit. You've worked with so many parents, maybe for the women who are listening, some things that you kind of see over and over that people might not even be aware of or having an impact on how they're experiencing parenting their own kids.
Yeah, I mean, often there's so much I can say about this, but yeah, when I share my story, people are like, "Wow, you really had a tough life. Your trauma is real trauma." I have never, and there is more to my story, right? So if I tell you my life story, you'd be crying your eyes out. But believe me, I have a really good life. I'm really happy. If you knew me personally, people always say, "Wow,
Hmm.
you're the person who is more sane and put together and has everything, has theirs together."
Yeah.
It's because of my background, and I'm very resilient and capable
Yes.
because of those experiences. But that doesn't mean we have to compare our traumas,
Yep.
and that's not how it works. We
That's
all
right.
have something.
Hmm.
Nobody had a perfect childhood, and most people, while maybe I had traumatic experiences that you can put your finger on it and say that was trauma. You were hungry, you were homeless, you were neglected, you were this. So
Yeah.
people recognize that. But a lot of people had emotional hunger, emotional neglect.
Mm, yep.
A lot of people have relational trauma, attachment trauma, right? So, and I know people who don't have big traumas in their lives, right? And I'm not one to say, everybody has trauma. I know people who did have really pretty good lives and childhoods.
Hmm.
I know people like that.
Yeah.
But they also still have things that they're working on,
Yeah.
dealing with. They have overbearing mothers, critical parents.
Hmm.
So everybody has something, whether you call it trauma or not. You were deprived of something growing up.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like we can all learn and grow, but how does that manifest in your life today? I feel like the biggest thing that I notice is most of us, most of our afflictions come from our sense of worthiness,
Mm,
how worthy we feel,
yeah.
or how shameful we feel for who we are. And that's a spectrum. There is people who feel completely worthless and shameful and not good enough, like it's the extreme version of that.
Yeah.
And life for those people is extremely difficult. And there are people, it's just a spectrum. Wherever you are on that spectrum, I feel like most of our afflictions stem from that sense, not feeling good enough, that sense of
Mm,
worth. And we do everything, either, achievement, performance, or addictions, or shopping, or changing ourselves excessively. And it manifests in different ways in different
mhm.
people, but the root of it is the same. I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough, and I have to change that. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah,
And whoever feels, you know, on the extreme of that spectrum has a harder time living their life.
that's right. Where or how does that tend to originate? Without like knowing everyone's particulars, like because I
Yeah.
think so many I agree with you, so many of us, and we don't even realize it, how it's driving our behavior. But if we get curious about where that might originate, what do you tend to see?
Well, it is hard to pinpoint and say it. Obviously, everything originates in our childhood, right? We
Yeah.
we are born into a specific family, into a specific system, and into a specific nation and country and culture, and so that all plays a role. The messages that you receive, the way your parents were parented, what you see,
Yeah.
it's just a conglomerate of things, I think. um, it could be an experience of discrimination that
Yeah.
your family had, and it was sort of passed down onto you. And it's a complicated topic. I think trying to understand where it's coming from is not as useful as knowing what to do with it now,
Mm,
right? I am of mindset of also about trauma. And I've been working with a client yesterday, and she kept saying, I lose my cool at my kids, I yell and scream, I need to learn how to regulate myself. I know how it stems from my childhood with my mom and my sister. And I said, okay, let's pause for a minute. I'll teach you how to regulate your nervous system right now in the moment, so that you can be more patient and you can have space in your life and day and respond more mindfully. She's like, no, no, no. We'll talk about that later. But how about my
mm,
sister and my mother? I'm like, why does that matter? Why do you need
mm.
to know? Right? I think it's important and it's not.
Yeah.
So the why is not as important as what can we do about it now, and how we can better ourselves and have a different life.
Yeah. So, what are some of those things we can do about it now? Because it's so pervasive, right? It impacts how we
Yeah.
discipline. It impacts how we take care of ourselves. It impacts self care and priorities. It impacts how we show up at work.
Yeah, I think the biggest and the most important tool, and this may sound grandiose and you know crazy, is cultivating self-compassion.
Yeah, I
This
agree.
is the only antidote I know, through my work and research, to unworthiness, to feeling that you're not lovable and you're not good
Mhm.
enough, that, insert whatever, however you feel about yourself. The only way is through learning to be kind and caring towards yourself. And that is not easy, because
Mhm.
you don't feel deserving of that, right? So the root of the problem is you don't feel deserving of love and goodness. So you sabotage your life, and you self-loathe and self-neglect and self-abuse and self-insert whatever,
Yeah.
you have internalized those behaviors and you do that those onto yourself. So you need to be aware of that,
Hmm.
that there's nothing wrong with you. This is how things are. And can you start somewhere? I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of conversation about self-love and self-care. What I want people to know is it all begins with self acceptance.
Oh,
Forget self love for a
yeah.
moment. You don't
Yeah.
have to love yourself. You may never love the parts of yourself you hate, but you can learn to accept them. I think the practice has to be showing up for yourself and not neglecting or abusing or abandoning yourself the way you have been by the people who were supposed to care and love and protect you. You don't want to do unto you the same thing. So recognize that and show up for yourself, make a commitment and learn to accept yourself fully with
Mm.
all your flaws and um, all your history and without judgment. Maybe you have addictions. Maybe you do this. Maybe you made mistakes. Maybe you have 3 divorces in your history.
Mhm.
Maybe, right? Everybody has things, but
Yeah.
learn to accept and be there for yourself, which is so hard because you haven't internalized that someone was there for you when you needed them the most.
Yep.
A lot of people don't have that. And that's attachment, relational trauma, which you can't put your finger on it. I can tell you my trauma originated in 1988, December 7. That's when my world changed. But that doesn't mean before that I didn't have things already,
It's true.
with my parents. And so relational trauma is a lot harder because it's ongoing and there is no one event per se,
Yeah.
right? It's how you're being seen, validated, invalidated, um, cared for. You internalize all of that. It's a cumulative experience and it can be a little crazy making. You can feel a certain way, like you are undeserving love and care, and you end up in relationships that are more abusive and they make you feel low and things like that, and you wonder like, why do I do that? So I think that's where it
Mhm.
begins. You need to learn to accept yourself. That should be your practice, and be kind and loving towards all parts of yourself, slowly, gradually, and give yourself self compassion in the present moment when you make a mistake or when you fail. I
Yeah.
think that's the work.
I think I couldn't agree more. And I think I know so many people listening are resonating. And I think that for most of us, we know that we're better for ourselves and our relationships and our kids when we're being kind to ourselves. And we understand conceptually how compassion for ourselves would be really healing. And yet, practically, it can be really hard to access, almost like we're faking it, right? Like we're telling ourselves things that we don't actually even believe, especially at first. What might be some like really practical places to start for a woman listening who wants to be more compassionate with herself? Is it just catching the old stories and the words and that internal voice? Like what could she
Mm.
start working through or noticing?
That's a really good question. And it's different for everyone. So everybody has their own patterns, right? So
Yeah.
there might be a person who is constantly judging and criticizing themselves. You may have an overactive inner critic. I don't have that, for example.
Hmm.
Mine is different. My inner voice is very on my side. It's
Hmm.
very like coaching me. Yes, it can say sometimes, you're an idiot, Anna, you should have not done that, but it's not that negative. Some people have a really, really harsh inner critic.
Yeah.
So if that's your situation, you need to know what is your pattern.
Yeah.
It could be that harsh inner critic, or it's like if you're garbage, you're whatever. So for that, you have to recognize. So there is other ways. Let's say you may be doing things for other people to please, and you're buying things for people, presents, and you're there for everyone, you're over helping, overstretching yourself, and you're neglecting yourself.
Mm.
You're not meeting your own needs. You're
Yeah.
not even aware of your own needs, but you're there for everyone. So that's a sign. That's another sign. um, you can have the critic and that, right?
Yep.
You could be mistreating your body. You could be drinking and misusing things and drugs, that you could be eating awful things that you know is bad for you, but you're gravitated towards that because you can't overcome that. So that's another thing. You are mistreating your body in different ways. You could be putting yourself at harm's way, risky activities, risky relationships, you name it. It's a big spectrum. So it shows up differently for different people. You know, it's in your mind, it's in your body, it's not feeling your feelings. We talked about that on our podcast. It's that disconnect from your own self. But what does that look like? Your body, your feelings, your heart, your intuition, you know, and it's like, where do you start? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Where do you start? It depends how deep and intense it is for a person, right? Like I said, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
If and whatever works for one person may not work for the other. But if you are the one who is judging constantly yourself, and you know, you have that harsh inner critic, what can you do in those moments? Can you just pause and talk to yourself with the softer tone, with a kinder language,
Mm.
with maybe
Yeah.
a nickname that a caregiver or loved one used when you were little? That's a small act, but speaking yourself when you catch yourself in those moments where your inner critic is talking harshly, can you pause and switch to a different language?
Yeah.
Can you get up every morning and greet yourself and say, Anna, I love you. You look beautiful. Some people hate themselves. They hate their body. They hate how they look. They are constantly obsessed. So many women are obsessed with weight loss and they hate their body. Well, can you learn to appreciate your body?
Yeah.
Can you give gratitude to your body every day?
Yes.
How much criticism do you bring to your body as opposed to how much gratitude? Can you switch that like a
Mm.
scale? Can
Yeah.
you increase more appreciation and gratitude for your body as a practice, as opposed to then slowly you will start to eat better and put,
Mm.
because if you feel like your body is a good thing, it's serving you, is you're appreciating your body, then you put good things into your body.
That's
You can
right.
pause and evaluate consciously and say, this is ultra processed foods, this is harmful. I don't drink alcohol, and people force me all the time. I'm like, no, I don't want to put that in my body. People are like, it tastes great, but I'm like, no, like, this is not aligned with who I want to be, right? It's it's so many things. It's when
Yeah.
you make a mistake, do you punish yourself? Do
Yeah.
you blame yourself? Do you end up in a shame spiral? Can you coach yourself in those moments and put your hand on your heart and say, it's okay, Anna, you yelled at your child. You're not the worst parent.
Mm.
Everybody loses their cool. There's
Yeah.
so many parents right now in this very moment who just lost their cool.
Yes.
Just observe that. Be mindful. Put your hand on your heart and treat yourself with a little kindness, the way you would give to another person.
Mm.
These are small things, right? When you make a mistake, when you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, it can be very small act of saying no to someone and to something, or it could be big, but you know, it looks different for everyone. So I'll
Yeah.
pause because I can just go on and on.
No, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. And I think we can all see parts of ourselves in there and patterns we tend to run in ways that we could be more intentional about how we think or talk about ourselves or to ourselves. And you kind of started to talk about parenting or snapping at our kids or disciplining them or what have you. And I think that's an area where we can feel really frustrated, and it can be easy to be hard on ourselves about, you know, how we respond when everyone's kind of running up here, right? So I'd love to talk about that a little bit. Maybe, again, you share such practical advice, but maybe we could zoom out a little bit about what's happening when it feels like things are escalating with our kids. And then some of the strategies that you found to be really helpful and teach to help us navigate those moments, and even the aftermath, maybe, that can be that would serve us better.
So I see this as this three-part process, right? There
Okay.
is the moment when you lose your cool and you lash out and you do and say things that are hurtful and you regret later, and do you end up in this shame spiral, and you criticize yourself, and you talk to yourself badly, and you
Mm,
parent from that place again, and that's a terrible place to be. That's why you need self-compassion in those
yeah.
moments.
Yeah.
So that's the moment. I see what comes after the moment, which is equally important, which we all mess up. Relationships are messy. Conflict is inherent to all relationships, including parent child.
Yes.
And it's okay. You're going to lose your cool. You're going to yell at your kids, but that doesn't mean that you are a worthless parent. You are a bad parent. I don't want that to color your entire parenting. That would be like a terrible thing. But recognize that that's a moment
Yeah.
that requires repair. And 70% of the time, according to research, we are in mismatch. There is discord between, in relationships. So it's only 30% of the time that we are attuned and present. So knowing that, don't be so hard on
Mm.
yourself,
Oh,
right? So
yeah.
you can do things, and repair is more important than avoiding conflict. And you can learn to repair. Maybe many of us haven't seen positive models of repair. Our
Mm.
parents never apologized,
Yeah.
right? They never
Yeah.
taught us how to repair. So a lot of people are conflict avoidant. But conflict is not a bad thing. It creates more intimacy, it brings more depth and understanding and authenticity to our relationships.
Yeah.
So learning how to do repair is crucial in the health of the relationship. So there is the moment when you lose your cool, but there's also the moment after that where you need to repair with your kids or with your partners.
Mhm.
And there is the before the moment, what leads to that moment. There are multiple things, right? It's your history, it's your programming. Why are you so vulnerable? Why you get so triggered by your children? There is that historical part of our
Mhm.
traumas and our wounding and our programming, but there is also the second aspect, the daily stress and the burnout and the overwhelm and the anxiety that we all have living in a modern world, the world that is on edge and uncertain and so much going on. We parent alone without support and very few resources. Of course we're going to yell and scream at our kids. No one is pouring into us,
Yeah.
right? So it's hard to do everything. So what's important is the before the moment. You can do work to learn to regulate your nervous system so that you're not always on edge. The work that you do, that I do, you can do some healing work in a therapeutic setting about your traumas and things like that, so that how to be. And you also need to learn communication skills. I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of us suffer with that. Communication is important in any relationship. So if we can work on all of those things, which sounds like enormous, but it's not, right? Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
separate everything and
That's
work at
right.
them as separate tasks.
Yeah.
You can do while you're going through it. I think the biggest thing I would say is parenting is a relationship first and foremost. And oftentimes, when we step into the role of the parent, we approach it from a role. I am a parent, I'm a mom, I'm a dad. We lose sight of the relational aspect of it,
Wow.
and we resort to punishments, to rewards. And the conditioning comes in. Then you're more eager to discipline, take their devices away because you're the parent, because you see your role. That's what dictates
Yeah.
your day-to-day approach. But if you see it as a relationship, then you can relax a little bit, because all relationships have ups and downs, they have conflict, and you can repair and create intimacy. And so you don't need to micromanage or punish them or reward their behavior. You're in a relationship. It's not this hierarchy that I'm your parent and you give me your phone, or else. It's a reciprocal, you can have a conversation with your child.
Yeah.
Yes, you are the parent. You can use non-punitive discipline, right? Discipline
Mhm.
is not a dirty word,
Right.
but that's one thing. Another thing I think is, let's not forget that we enter into parent-child relationship the second time. The first
Mhm.
time we were the child when we entered into this relationship. The second time we're the parent. Ooh, that's where the trouble comes in. All your traumas and triggers and unmet needs and everything that you have practiced with your parents that is like ingrained in you, all the triggers and things, boom, show up in this relationship where you are the parent and you have the sort of upper hand now, and you bring all your unresolved stuff. Knowing that and separating it and recognizing that your child is a separate entity, you are not a child anymore, you are a parent.
Yeah.
So that could be helpful too, to recognize, what are you bringing into your own parenting? Are you
Mm.
taking things personally? A lot of people do.
Yep.
And why is that? Of course, that's linked to your childhood. You
Yeah.
were not heard or seen. And now, the moment your child disobeys you, that evokes that pattern in you.
Yeah.
This morning, my daughter was a little too abrupt. She has an exam at school and she has her SATs tomorrow.
Mm.
Obviously, she's anxious and tense, big, right?
Yeah.
So she's a teenager, she's 17. So in the morning, she's like, "What are you reading?" Some kind of rude way. And I said to her, I said, "Well, I'm reading I was taking a Zen Buddhism class. I said, I'm reading my article." She says, "But your class is over. Why?" She was like abrupt with me, and her tone was, um, I can recognize that she had stress and pressure, and it was coming through her voice. She was being critical of my actions that are not completely related to her.
Right.
In that moment, it's so
Mm.
important to separate yourself and not take it personally. Oh,
So
she's
good.
disrespectful, or she's rude. I don't see it that way.
So
I
good.
see her own reality and I disengage. I don't respond. If I
Yeah.
can manage not to react and say, "Don't talk to me like that, how dare you," blah blah blah, then I did a good job. Then
Yeah.
10 minutes passed by, she came by and she said, can you make me some breakfast, blah blah blah. Her tone has changed
Yeah.
because she herself recognized that, wow, why am I talking like this? Because I didn't react,
That's right.
I didn't take it personally. So that's one thing. Know that, children's moods and changes so quickly. You don't want to respond to everything they say at the face value and get into an argument. They take things personally, and it just creates more problems.
Yeah, and it's not easy to do, right? To have that distance and disengage and not take the bait and enter into that power
Yeah.
struggle. But
But
yeah,
that's the practice,
that's the
right? I
work. Yeah.
often joke, and I not joke, but I often say, used to say it on the podcast, parenting is a practice.
Yeah.
Whatever you are practicing, that's the practice.
That's
You
right.
know?
With you, before we end your interview, you shared a story on your podcast when we were together about a moment that you can remember with your daughter at a restaurant when she was young, and kind
Mm,
of the lesson. And I just found that to be so profound, especially for all the people listening who are in a season that's similar to where you were when you had that revelation. And I think it might be really encouraging and helpful for them to hear
yeah.
it, if you might share it again.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And because you asked me like what lesson I learned through parenting, obviously there are many. But I think that moment, my daughter was 3 years old, and we didn't have help or anything. We would go out to restaurants and things like that, but it was so difficult, unpredictable. She could make mess. She wouldn't sit still. She would run around. The meal would be, you know done in 10 minutes because we would never eat. One of us would pick her up, go outside, the other one would eat. It was so tense and fraught with emotion. And one day I remember exactly what restaurant I was, where I was, and I just said to myself, like, what are you doing, Anna? It's okay. She's 3. She's going to make mess. She's going to be loud. She's going to cry. She's not going to sit in her seat. People are going to look at you. They are going to judge, but they have seen such behavior before. They had kids. Relax. This is not important. What's
Mm.
important is like the larger picture of parenting, not what we do. And something shifted in me and it just relaxed me. And from there on, when you're relaxed, things go a lot better. And when you're tense, your children pick up on your
Yes,
stress and they
yes.
behave the worst, right? Like you're in an airplane. When you're tense, they pick up on that stress. There's so much research on this. So
Yes.
managing our own internal reactions, our own stress, and regulating our stress is the biggest gift that we can give to our children
Yep.
if we want to manage, quote unquote, their behavior. And know that you're not going to manage their behavior all the time. And no, it doesn't reflect on you whether you are a good parent or bad. And let me just tell you that good parenting, bad parenting, it doesn't exist. It exists in your mind. There
Ah,
is just
come on.
parenting.
That's right.
Don't judge yourself or others by saying, she's a good parent, I'm a good parent, I was a bad parent. Neglect that black and white thinking.
Yeah.
There is just parenting, being
Wow.
neutral. That's what gets us in trouble because there's good behavior, bad behavior. No, there is just behavior. And that's and how we perceive and react to it. And when I did that, things shifted. I was more relaxed. I could enjoy. Yes, she was rambunctious. She wouldn't sit still, but my
But 3-year-olds
attitude
do.
shifted. My
Yeah.
attitude shifted and
Wow.
everything shifted from that. I think that's so important.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just feel like a collective, like, exhale. A collective, like, giving ourselves permission to not get so caught up in this stuff that's like actually really normal, right? And if we
Yeah.
could just like disentangle all the stories that we have with it, we'll find that we can be more relaxed and accepting of reality, which is what's going on. And that presents a very different opportunity for the experience of parenting. Wow.
Yeah.
So good. Okay. So for everyone listening who would love to hear more from you and learn and listen, obviously we will link the podcast for everyone to go check out. But where else are you hanging out? Where else can they connect with you?
I don't hang out anywhere else. I have my website, authenticparenting.com, and the
Yes.
podcast.
Yep.
I was on Instagram years ago, but I deactivated my account. I am not on social media. I don't use social media. So you can't find me, but I have a Facebook group that is it's a support group, and twice a month I offer free support calls for the members of the group since the pandemic for the past 5 years. So that's what I have, quote unquote, online, right? But other than that, it's the podcast, baby, and then
Yep.
my website.
So good. Yeah. And that has everything, you guys, Wendy. She
Yeah.
has different resources and all the ways that you can connect and work with her. But Anna, just thanks for the work that you are doing. Thanks for just being so real and sharing your story and your experiences and all of the healing that you're bringing to other people through that. And thanks so much for being with us and sharing today.
Thank you so much for giving me space and hearing me out. And I really appreciate it. I
Mm.
loved the questions that you asked, and I appreciate your curiosity. Thank you so
Mm.
much for being so open and inviting.
Beautiful.